The stagecoach had barely rolled to a stop in front of the ticket office in St. Louis, Missouri, when Penelope Dawson realized her purse was gone, stolen somewhere between the cramped boarding house and this dusty street corner where her entire future had just crumbled into nothing. She stood frozen on the wooden sidewalk in her worn traveling dress, watching other passengers purchase their tickets west while panic clawed at her throat. She had spent 3 years saving every penny from her seamstress work to escape her uncle's house, to start fresh in California, where no one knew her past, and now some thief had taken it all in the span of a heartbeat. "Miss, you need to move along if you are not buying passage," the ticket agent said through the window, his voice clipped and impatient. Penelope's hands trembled as she checked her pockets one more time, knowing it was futile. "Please, I had the money this morning. Someone must have taken it." "Is there any way I could work for my passage or pay you back when I arrive?" The man's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "This is a business, not a charity. Move along." She stumbled away from the window, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. Around her, St. Louis bustled with activity, people hurrying about their business while she stood like a stone in a river, everything flowing past her while she remained stuck. The September afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and she pressed a hand to her forehead, trying to think of any solution that did not involve returning to her uncle's house, where she had endured 4 years of criticism and contempt since her parents died. "Excuse me, miss." The voice was deep and gentle, with a slow drawl that marked him as a man from farther south. "I could not help but overhear your trouble at the ticket window." Penelope turned to find a tall man standing a respectful distance away, hat in his hands. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that needed a trim. His clothes were clean but well-worn, the clothes of a working man, and his brown eyes held a kindness that made her throat tight. "I am sorry you had to witness my humiliation," she said, straightening her shoulders and trying to maintain some dignity. "Nothing humiliating about being robbed," he replied. "My name is Matthew Pierce. I am heading back to Colorado Territory to a town called Greeley. Just sold a herd of horses here and was about to purchase my own ticket when I heard you talking to that agent." Penelope wiped at her eyes quickly. "I am Penelope Dawson. I was supposed to be going to California, but I suppose I will be going nowhere now." Matthew shifted his weight, his hat turning in his hands. She noticed they were strong hands, calloused from hard work but steady. "Miss Dawson, I know this is forward and you do not know me from Adam, but I would like to help you. I could purchase your ticket west. You could travel to Greeley, at least get you out of St. Louis if that is what you are running from." Her breath caught. "Sir, I could not possibly accept such charity. I have no way to repay you." "It is not charity," he said firmly. "I am making you a business proposition. Greeley is a new settlement, only been established a few years back in 1870. It is growing fast and there is a terrible shortage of women. The town needs seamstresses, cooks, teachers, all manner of professions. You said you are a seamstress." "I am," Penelope confirmed, wondering how he had known that. "Your fingers," he said, gesturing to her hands. "They have the marks of someone who works with needle and thread. My sister mentioned once that all the best seamstresses have those small calluses. Anyway, Greeley needs skilled workers. You could establish yourself there, make a good living. Consider the ticket money alone. Pay me back when you are able, even if it takes years. No interest, no pressure. Just one person helping another." Penelope studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. She had learned in her 21 years to be cautious of men offering help, but Matthew Pierce's expression remained open and honest. "Why would you do this for a complete stranger?" He was quiet for a moment, looking down at his hat before meeting her eyes again. 5 years ago, when I was 19 and fool enough to think I knew everything, I left my family's farm in Tennessee with dreams of making my fortune out west. I got robbed my first week in Kansas City, lost everything including my horse. A rancher named Samuel Hart found me sleeping in his barn, half-starved and too proud to ask for help. Instead of running me off, he gave me work, taught me about horses, and when I left 2 years later, he refused to take payment for the food and board I owed him. Said I should just help someone else when I got the chance. Well, miss, I have had my chance now. I built a small horse ranch outside Greeley, and I finally have enough saved that I can honor Sam's memory by doing for you what he did for me. The sincerity in his voice broke through the last of her resistance. Penelope had been alone for so long, fighting for every scrap of security, that accepting help felt like admitting defeat. But pride would not buy her a ticket, and going back to her uncle was unthinkable. Mr. Pierce, if you truly mean this, I will accept your help, but I will pay you back every cent, I swear it. I believe you will, Matthew said with a small smile. Now let us get you that ticket before the next stage fills up. 20 minutes later, Penelope held a ticket to Greeley, Colorado territory in her shaking hands. Matthew had purchased his own ticket as well, along with some food supplies for the journey. The stage would leave at dawn the next morning, which meant she needed somewhere to stay for the night. I have a small sum left, she said, calculating quickly in her head. Enough for a room at a modest boarding house. The Riverside Inn is clean and safe, Matthew told her. 2 blocks north of here. Tell Mrs. Chen that Matthew Pierce sent you and she will give you a fair rate. You know everyone in this city? Penelope asked, surprising herself with the teasing tone. He grinned, and it transformed his serious face into something younger and lighter. Just the important people. I will meet you at the stage depot at dawn. Try to get some rest, Miss Dawson. It is a long journey to Colorado. That night, in a small clean room at the Riverside Inn where Mrs. Chen had indeed given her a fair rate, Penelope lay awake wondering if she had made the right choice. She knew nothing about Greeley or Colorado territory. She knew nothing about Matthew Pierce, except that he had kind eyes and a story about a generous rancher. But she thought about the alternative, returning to her uncle's house, where she was little more than an unpaid servant, and she knew that even uncertainty was better than that prison. The stage-coach departed St. Louis, just as the sun painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. Penelope climbed aboard with her single worn carpetbag, everything she owned in the world contained in that small space. Matthew sat across from her, and there were 4 other passengers as well. An older couple heading to visit their son in Denver, a young man who looked barely 18 hoping to strike it rich in the mining territories, and a stern-faced woman in expensive clothes who sniffed disdainfully at her fellow travelers and opened a book without speaking to anyone. The first day passed in uncomfortable silence broken only by the rhythmic pounding of hooves and the creak of the coach. Penelope watched the landscape change through the small window, the broad Mississippi River giving way to rolling plains. She had never been outside of Missouri, and the vastness of the land both thrilled and terrified her. First time west? Matthew asked quietly that evening when they stopped to change horses and rest for the night at a way station. First time anywhere, Penelope admitted. They stood outside the rough wooden building, stretching their legs while the station master tended to the horses. I was born in St. Louis. My parents had a small dry goods store. After they died from cholera 4 years ago, I went to live with my uncle. He was not pleased about it. I am sorry about your parents, Matthew said. That is a hard loss. It was, she agreed, wrapping her arms around herself against the evening chill. "But I like to think they would approve of me taking this chance, trying to build something of my own." "I think they would be proud of your courage," she laughed, but it came out bitter. "Courage? I am terrified, Mr. Pierce. I am traveling hundreds of miles with a stranger to a town I have never heard of until yesterday. That is not courage, that is desperation." "Sometimes they are the same thing," he replied. "And please call me Matthew. Mr. Pierce makes me feel like my father." Over the next several days, as the stagecoach carried them across Kansas and into Colorado territory, Penelope and Matthew fell into an easy companionship. He told her about his ranch, a small spread of 80 acres where he bred and trained horses. He had 3 mares and a good stallion, along with 2 geldings he used for working cattle for the neighboring ranchers. "It is not much yet," he said, "but the land is good, and Greeley is establishing itself as an agricultural community. The Union colony that founded the town requires all residents to abstain from alcohol and to maintain high moral standards. It attracts good families, hard workers. I think you will like it there." Penelope shared her own dreams of opening a proper dressmaking shop, not just doing alterations and mending but creating beautiful gowns like the ones she had seen in the ladies' magazines. "In St. Louis, I only worked on practical clothes for practical people. But I can do fine work. I know I can. I just never had the opportunity to prove it." "Then Greeley will be your opportunity," Matthew said with conviction. "The settlement is full of people trying to prove themselves. You will fit right in." The stern-faced woman, whose name they learned was Mrs. Hartford, warmed slightly as the journey progressed. She was heading to Denver to live with her daughter and admitted that she admired Penelope's determination to start over. "Not many young women would have the constitution for such an undertaking," Mrs. Hartford said on their 6th day of travel. "I hope this town appreciates what it is getting." The young prospector, whose name was James, was less successful in his attempts at conversation. He tried repeatedly to engage Penelope in flirtation, much to her discomfort, until Matthew quietly suggested that the young man focus his attention elsewhere. There was something in Matthew's tone, polite but firm, that made James back off immediately. "Thank you," Penelope told Matthew later. "I was running out of polite ways to discourage him." "He is young and foolish," Matthew replied. "Thinks every woman is waiting to be charmed. He will learn." As they crossed into Colorado territory, Penelope felt her anxiety begin to shift into something else. Anticipation, perhaps, or maybe hope. The landscape here was different from anything she had known, with the Rocky Mountains rising in the distance like sentinels guarding the west. The air felt thinner, cleaner somehow, and the sky seemed impossibly vast. "It is beautiful," she breathed, pressing close to the window. "Wait until you see it in winter," Matthew said. "The mountains get covered in snow, and on clear mornings they shine like they have been dusted with diamonds." "You love it here," she observed. "I do," he admitted. "Back in Tennessee, I felt like I was suffocating. Every path was already laid out, every choice already made. Here, a man can build whatever life he has the strength to create. It is hard work, and some days I wonder if I made the right choice leaving my family, but then I wake up and see those mountains, and I know I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Penelope understood that feeling. She had felt suffocated in her uncle's house, every day the same as the one before, no future except more of the same grinding servitude. "I hope I can build something here too." "You will," Matthew said with such certainty that she almost believed him. They arrived in Greeley late on a September afternoon in 1873, the stagecoach rolling down a wide main street lined with neat wooden buildings. Penelope was surprised by how organized the town appeared. She had expected something rougher, more temporary, but Greeley had the look of a place built to last. There were proper boardwalks, glass windows in most of the shops, and she could see a church steeple rising in the distance. "The Union Colony takes pride in planning," Matthew explained as he helped her down from the coach. His hand was warm and steady on her elbow. "Every street is mapped out, every lot measured. It is probably the most civilized town in the territory." Penelope's legs were unsteady after so many days of travel, and she was grateful for his support. The other passengers dispersed quickly, but she stood on the street feeling lost all over again. She had made it west, but now what? "First thing is to get you settled," Matthew said, as if reading her thoughts. "Mrs. Foster runs a boarding house for single women. It is respectable and affordable. Let me take you there, and tomorrow I can introduce you to some people who might need your services." "You have done so much already," Penelope protested. "I cannot ask you to do more." "You are not asking, I am offering." He picked up her carpet bag before she could reach for it. "Come on, it is not far." Mrs. Foster's boarding house was a 2-story white building with green shutters and a garden out front where late-season flowers still bloomed. A handsome woman in her 40s answered the door, her face breaking into a genuine smile when she saw Matthew. "Matthew Pierce, as I live and breathe. We heard you went to St. Louis to sell those horses. Successful trip." "Very successful, Mrs. Foster. And I brought back something more valuable than money." He gestured to Penelope. "This is Miss Penelope Dawson, an experienced seamstress from St. Louis. She is looking to establish herself here in Greeley. I was hoping you might have a room available." Mrs. Foster's shrewd eyes assessed Penelope quickly but not unkindly. "A seamstress? Oh, my dear, you will have more work than you can handle. Come in, come in." "Yes, I have a room, small but comfortable. How long do you think you will need it?" "I am not certain," Penelope admitted. "I need to find work first, establish my business." "Well, do not worry about that right now. Come inside and have some supper. You must be exhausted from the journey." Mrs. Foster took Penelope's arm and began leading her inside, then paused to look back at Matthew. "Will you be joining us, Matthew?" "I should get back to my ranch," he said. "I have been away for nearly 3 weeks, and I need to check on my horses." Penelope felt a sudden panic at the thought of him leaving. He had been her one constant through the journey, the only person she knew in this strange new place. "Matthew, wait. I do not know how to thank you for everything." He smiled at her, that warm expression that made his whole face change. "No thanks needed, Penelope. I will come by tomorrow afternoon, introduce you around town. Until then, Mrs. Foster will take good care of you." After he left, Penelope felt his absence like a physical thing. She followed Mrs. Foster through the boarding house in a daze, only half listening as the older woman chattered about the town and its residents. The room was indeed small, barely large enough for the narrow bed, washstand, and small trunk, but it was clean and the window looked out on the garden. Most importantly, it was hers. "Supper is at 6, Mrs. Foster said. There are 3 other ladies staying here currently. All good women. You will get along fine. Rest now, dear. You look about ready to collapse." Alone in the room, Penelope sat on the bed and let herself feel the full weight of the past week. She had lost everything, accepted help from a stranger, traveled across half the country, and now she was here in Greeley, Colorado territory, at the base of the Rocky Mountains, about to start a completely new life. It was overwhelming and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She pulled out the small bundle from her carpet bag that she had wrapped most carefully. Inside were her sewing supplies, the tools of her trade, and the one thing of value she still possessed: needles, thread, scissors, a measuring tape, and her mother's silver thimble. She slipped the thimble onto her finger, drawing comfort from the familiar weight of it. "I made it, Mama," she whispered to the empty room. "I am going to build something here, I promise." That evening she met her fellow boarders at supper. There was Sarah Mitchell, a schoolteacher about Penelope's age with red hair and a quick smile. Margaret Thornton was a widow in her 30s who worked as a nurse. The third woman, young Lucy Freeman, was only 19 and worked at the general store. They welcomed Penelope warmly, asking about her journey and exclaiming excitedly when they learned she was a seamstress. "Oh, thank heavens," Sarah said. "The only other seamstress in town is Mrs. Yates, and she is so busy that it takes weeks to get anything done. I have a dress that needs the hem taken up. Could you do it?" "Of course," Penelope said, grateful for the prospect of immediate work. "And I need a new winter coat," Margaret added. "Would you be able to make one?" "I would be happy to." Lucy leaned forward conspiratorially. "Is it true that Matthew Pierce brought you here?" "That is so romantic." Penelope felt her cheeks heat. "It is not romantic. He was simply being kind. I was robbed of my traveling money and he generously loaned me the ticket fare. It was a business arrangement, nothing more." "Matthew is one of the finest men in the territory," Mrs. Foster said firmly. "He came here 3 years ago with almost nothing and built that ranch through sheer determination. He is honest, hardworking, and decent. Any woman would be fortunate to have his regard." "I am sure that is true," Penelope said carefully, "but he was just helping someone in need. I am certain he would have done the same for anyone." Sarah and Lucy exchanged knowing looks that made Penelope want to protest further, but Mrs. Foster changed the subject, asking about Penelope's experience and what kind of work she hoped to do. The conversation shifted to safer ground, and Penelope began to relax, enjoying the companionship of other women after so many lonely years. That night, lying in her narrow bed and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a new town, Penelope thought about Matthew. She owed him a significant sum of money, at least $40 for the ticket and supplies. It would take her months to pay it back, maybe longer depending on how quickly she could establish her business. She hoped he had meant what he said about no pressure, because it would be some time before she could repay him. But it was not just the debt that kept her thoughts circling back to him. It was the way he had looked at her when he promised everything would work out. The gentleness in his voice when he spoke about his own struggles. The protective way he had dealt with the young prospector's unwanted attention. She barely knew him, but something about Matthew Pierce made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her parents died. "Do not be foolish," she whispered to herself in the darkness. He was being kind, nothing more. Focus on your work, pay back your debt, and build your life. That is what you came here to do. Matthew appeared at the boarding house the next afternoon as promised, looking freshly washed and wearing a clean shirt. Penelope had spent the morning working on Sarah's hem and had already been approached by 2 other women in the house who needed sewing done. She was beginning to think Greeley might actually offer the opportunities Matthew had promised. "Are you ready for a tour of the town?" he asked when Mrs. Foster called Penelope to the parlor. "I am, thank you." She had worn her best dress, a simple blue cotton that she had made herself. It was well constructed if plain, but she had added some careful details to the collar and cuffs that showed her skill. They walked down the broad main street together, and Matthew pointed out the important buildings. The mercantile where she could buy supplies, the post office, the bank, the town hall. There were several churches, a schoolhouse, and a newspaper office. "Greeley already has nearly 2,000 people," Matthew told her. "The Union colony bought the land just 3 years ago, and the town has grown faster than anyone expected. More people arrive every month." "It is larger than I thought it would be," Penelope admitted. She had expected something more primitive, but Greeley looked established and prosperous. "Wait until you see the irrigation canals," Matthew said with pride. The colony built an extensive system to bring water from the Cache-la-Powder River. It is turning this land into productive farmland. That is why my horse ranch works. Good land means good grazing, which means healthy horses. He introduced her to what seemed like half the town. The owner of the mercantile, Mr. Hendricks, who immediately mentioned that his wife needed a new dress for church. The banker, Mr. Sutton, whose daughters were grown and getting married and would need trousseau items. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the restaurant, and who complained about the difficulty of finding someone to make proper tablecloths and napkins. Everyone was friendly and welcoming, and by the end of the afternoon, Penelope had more potential work than she had dared hope for. Her head was spinning with names and faces and possibilities. "You were right," she told Matthew as they walked back toward the boarding house. "There truly is opportunity here. I told you Greeley would be good for you," he said, looking pleased. "Give it a few months and you will have more business than you can handle." They paused outside Mrs. Foster's boarding house, and Penelope turned to face him. "Matthew, I need to know the exact amount I owe you. For the ticket, the food, everything. I want to start paying you back as soon as I receive payment for my first jobs. Penelope, there is no rush." "There is for me," she insisted. "Please, I need to know the figure." He sighed and pulled a small notebook from his pocket, flipping through the pages. The ticket was $38. Food and supplies came to about $6 more. Call it $45 total. It was more than she had feared, but less than she had worried it might be. "I will pay you back, Matthew. Every penny, I give you my word." "I know you will." He hesitated, as if wanting to say something more, but then just touched the brim of his hat. "I should head back to the ranch, but I will be in town again on Saturday for supplies. Perhaps I could call on you then, see how you are settling in." "I would like that," Penelope said, and was surprised to realize how much she meant it. Over the following weeks, Penelope threw herself into building her business. Word spread quickly about the new seamstress in town, and soon she was working from dawn until late into the night. She did alterations and mending, made simple dresses and shirts, created tablecloths and curtains. Every job she completed led to two more, and her small room at the boarding house became crowded with fabric and partially finished projects. Matthew came to town every Saturday, and he always stopped by to see her. Sometimes they would walk together through town, and he would tell her about his ranch. One of his mares had foaled, a strong colt that he hoped would become a fine working horse. He had won a contract to provide horses for a freight company, which meant steady income through the winter. His world seemed foreign to her city-raised sensibilities, but she loved listening to him talk about it. His passion for his work matched her own. "How much have you earned so far?" he asked one Saturday in early November as they sat on the bench outside the boarding house, enjoying the weak afternoon sunshine. $23, Penelope said proudly. "Nearly half of what I owe you. If business continues like this, I should be able to pay you back in full by Christmas." "That is impressive," Matthew said, "but remember you need to keep some money for yourself, for food, for rent, for supplies." "I am managing," she assured him. "Mrs. Foster has been very kind about the rent, letting me pay in installments. And some of my clients pay me in food or other goods instead of cash. Mrs. Patterson trades meals for sewing work, which helps considerably." "You are really making a place for yourself here," Matthew observed. "I am proud of you." The words warmed her more than they should. She had grown to look forward to Matthew's Saturday visits, to treasure the easy conversations they shared. He had become her closest friend in Greeley, the person she thought about when something amusing or interesting happened. But she reminded herself firmly that it was friendship, nothing more. He had helped her as a kindness, and she would not complicate that with foolish, romantic notions. But it was becoming harder to ignore the way her heart lifted when she saw him walking down the street toward the boarding house. The way his smile seemed to reach inside her chest and warm her from within. The way she found herself watching for him on Saturdays, positioning herself where she might catch a glimpse of him arriving in town. "Are you doing anything for Thanksgiving?" Matthew asked, breaking into her thoughts. "Mrs. Foster is preparing a meal for all of us at the boarding house," Penelope replied. "It should be nice. Would you consider coming out to my ranch instead?" The question came out in a rush, as if he had been building up courage to ask it. "It is not fancy, but I am cooking a turkey, and I thought you might like to see the place. See what your ticket money helped build." Penelope knew she should decline. Visiting a single man at his home was not proper, even in the relatively informal society of Greeley. But the hopeful look in Matthew's eyes made her hesitate. "Would it be just the two of us?" "I thought I would invite a few other people too," Matthew said quickly. "My neighbor, Tom Watson, and his wife Mary, maybe Sarah from the boarding house if she does not have other plans. Make it a proper gathering." "Then yes," Penelope heard herself say, "I would like that very much." Thanksgiving Day dawned cold and clear. Matthew arrived at the boarding house in a wagon to collect Penelope and Sarah, who had indeed agreed to come. The ride out to his ranch took about 30 minutes, following the road north from town, and then turning onto a smaller track that led toward the mountains. The ranch was more substantial than Penelope had imagined. There was a sturdy log cabin with a stone chimney, a large barn, and several corrals. The land stretched out in all directions, brown now with approaching winter but still beautiful in its vastness. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains rose in jagged splendor, their peaks already white with snow. "Welcome to my home," Matthew said, helping first Sarah and then Penelope down from the wagon. His hand lingered on Penelope's for just a moment longer than necessary, and she felt warmth spread through her at the contact. The cabin interior was neat and simply furnished. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, and Penelope could see that Matthew had made most of the furniture himself. It was rough but solid, the work of a practical man. The turkey was already roasting, and the cabin smelled wonderful. Tom and Mary Watson arrived shortly after, along with their 3 young children. Mary was a friendly woman about 30 years old who immediately began helping Matthew with the meal preparations. Tom was quieter, but his handshake was firm and his smile genuine when Matthew introduced Penelope. "So you are the seamstress we have heard so much about," Mary said. "Matthew has mentioned you at least a dozen times. Penelope this, Penelope that. I was beginning to think you might be imaginary." "Mary," Tom said warningly, but Matthew just laughed, though Penelope noticed his ears had turned slightly red. "Penelope is a real person and a talented seamstress," Matthew said, "and a good friend." The word friend should have pleased Penelope, but instead it left her feeling strangely hollow. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on helping prepare the meal. Soon the cabin was filled with the sounds of conversation and laughter. The Watson children played in the corner with some wooden toys Matthew had carved. Sarah entertained them with funny stories from the schoolhouse. The meal, when they finally sat down to eat, was delicious. "Matthew, you have really done well for yourself here," Tom said, gesturing around the cabin. "This is a fine place." "Thank you," Matthew replied. "It has been hard work, but I love it." "All you need now is a wife to share it with," Mary said archly. "A man should not live alone." "Mary, mind your own business," Tom chided, but Mary just laughed. "I am just saying what everyone thinks." Matthew is a good man with a good ranch. He should have a family. Penelope kept her eyes on her plate, but she felt Matthew's gaze on her. The air in the cabin suddenly seemed too warm, too close. "When I find the right woman, I will consider it," Matthew said quietly. "But I would want to be certain she could be happy here. Ranch life is not easy. It requires someone strong and determined. Someone like a woman who would travel halfway across the country to start a new life with nothing but a carpetbag and a dream," Sarah suggested innocently. This time Penelope did look up, and her eyes met Matthew's across the table. Something passed between them, something electric and frightening and exhilarating. She saw in his face that he cared for her, truly cared for her, and the realization made her breath catch. But along with the thrill came fear. She owed him money. Their relationship had started with her in his debt, and the imbalance made everything complicated. How could she trust her own feelings when gratitude was so tangled up with affection? How could she trust his feelings when obligation might be confused with attraction? She looked away first, breaking the connection, and the conversation moved on to safer topics. But for the rest of the afternoon, Penelope was acutely aware of Matthew. The way he moved around his cabin with easy confidence, the gentle way he interacted with the Watson children, the pride in his voice when he talked about his horses. She saw him not just as the kind stranger who had helped her, but as a man, a good man, someone she could imagine building a life with. The thought terrified her. As the sun began to set and the Watson family prepared to leave, Penelope helped Mary gather the children's things. "You have a beautiful family," Penelope told her honestly. "Thank you, dear. They are a handful, but they are my joy." Mary lowered her voice. "Matthew is a good man, Penelope, one of the best I have known, and the way he looks at you, well, I have not seen him look at anyone that way before." "We are just friends," Penelope said automatically. "Maybe that is true now," Mary replied, "but I think it could be more if you both allowed it." She squeezed Penelope's hand. "Do not let fear keep you from happiness. I know you are independent and strong, but everyone needs someone. Even us stubborn women." After the Watsons left, Sarah conveniently discovered she needed to visit the outhouse, leaving Matthew and Penelope alone in the cabin. The silence stretched between them, full of unspoken words. "Thank you for inviting me today," Penelope finally said. "Your home is lovely. Thank you for coming." Matthew stood by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel. "Penelope, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to race. "What is it?" "These past 2 months, getting to know you, seeing you every Saturday, it has meant more to me than I can properly express." He turned to face her fully. "You are one of the strongest, most determined people I have ever met. The way you came here with nothing and built a life for yourself, it amazes me. And somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of you as someone I was helping and started thinking of you as someone I could not imagine my life without." Penelope's hands were shaking. "Matthew, I still owe you money. I am still in your debt." "I do not care about the money," he said urgently. "I never did. That is not what this is about." "But how can I know that?" The words burst out of her. "How can I trust what I feel when gratitude is so mixed up with everything else? You saved me, Matthew. You gave me a chance when I had nothing. How do I separate owing you from caring about you?" He crossed the space between them, stopping just close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Do you care about me, Penelope? Truly?" "Yes," she whispered. "But I do not know if I trust it. I do not know if I trust myself." "Then we will wait," Matthew said simply. "We will wait until you have paid back every cent you owe me. We will wait until you feel certain of your own feelings. I am not going anywhere, Penelope. I can be patient." "That could take months," she warned him. "I do not care if it takes years." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hand. "You are worth waiting for." Sarah chose that moment to return, stomping her feet loudly on the porch to announce her presence. Matthew released Penelope's hand and stepped back, but the warmth of his touch lingered on her skin. The ride back to town was quiet. Sarah kept up a steady stream of chatter, bless her, filling the silence while Penelope's mind raced. She had feelings for Matthew, real feelings that went beyond gratitude. But she needed to prove to herself that she could stand on her own, that she was not just clinging to him out of dependence. She needed to pay back her debt and establish her independence before she could consider anything more. December arrived with bitter cold and the first heavy snowfalls. Penelope worked harder than ever, taking on as many jobs as she could manage. She made winter coats and warm dresses, mended blankets, and created Christmas gifts for half the town. Her fingers ached from the constant work, but every dollar she earned brought her closer to her goal. Matthew still came to town every Saturday, but their interactions were different now, more careful. They both knew something significant hung between them, waiting to be resolved. He would ask about her work, and she would tell him about her week. She would ask about his ranch, and he would describe the challenges of winter feeding and keeping the water troughs from freezing. They were scrupulously polite, painfully proper, and Penelope hated it even as she insisted on maintaining the distance. "You are being ridiculous," Sarah told her one evening in mid-December. "You clearly care about him and he clearly cares about you. Why torture yourselves?" "Because I need to do this right," Penelope insisted, working on a complicated dress seam by lamplight. "I will not start a relationship built on debt and obligation." "It is not built on debt," Sarah argued. "It is built on respect and affection and shared values. The debt is just an excuse because you are afraid." Penelope set down her sewing and rubbed her tired eyes. "Maybe I am afraid. Maybe I have good reason to be. My whole life, I have been dependent on someone else. My parents, then my uncle, then Matthew's charity. I need to prove that I can stand alone before I can choose to stand beside someone." Sarah's expression softened. "I understand that. Truly, I do. But do not wait so long that you push away something real." On December 20th, Penelope completed a large order for the mayor's wife, an elaborate dress for the Christmas social. Mrs. Sutton paid her $12, and when Penelope counted her savings that evening, she realized she finally had enough. $45, the exact amount of her debt to Matthew. Her hands shook as she held the money, this symbol of her independence and capability. She found Matthew the next Saturday at the mercantile, loading supplies into his wagon. Snow was falling gently, dusting everything in white. "Matthew, do you have a moment?" she called out. He turned, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Of course. What can I do for you?" Penelope pulled the small pouch from her pocket and held it out to him. $45. Every cent I owe you paid in full." Matthew stared at the pouch but did not take it. "Penelope, you did not have to do this now. I told you there was no rush." "There was a rush for me," she said firmly. "Take it, please. I need you to take it." He accepted the money slowly, his fingers brushing hers. "You did it. You built your business and paid back your debt. I am so proud of you." "I could not have done it without the chance you gave me," Penelope said. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "But I needed to prove to myself that I could do it, that I was capable and strong enough." "You are the strongest person I know," Matthew said quietly. "I am not, but I am trying to be." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Matthew, when you said you could wait, did you mean it? Are you still willing to wait?" His eyes widened. "Wait for what exactly?" "Wait for me to be absolutely certain of my own heart," she said. "Because I think I am certain now. I think I have been certain for weeks, but I needed to do this first. I needed to stand on my own feet before I could choose to walk beside you. Penelope, are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that I care about you, not because you helped me, but because of who you are. Your kindness, your integrity, your passion for your work. The way you make me feel safe and challenged at the same time. The way you believed in me when I barely believed in myself. She stepped closer to him, snow gathering in her hair. I am saying that if you still want to court me properly, I would like that very much. Matthew set the pouch of money down on the wagon seat, and then his hands were gently cupping her face, his thumbs brushing away snowflakes from her cheeks. Penelope Dawson, I would be honored to court you. I have wanted nothing else since the day you told me about your dreams of making beautiful dresses. You may kiss me now, she whispered. He smiled, that wonderful transformative smile that made her heart sing. I was hoping you would say that. The kiss was gentle and sweet, full of promise. Penelope felt like she was falling and flying at the same time, all her fears burning away in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, she saw her own joy reflected in his eyes. People are staring, she said, noticing several townspeople watching them with interest. Let them stare, Matthew replied. I have been wanting to do that for months. The gossip spread through Greeley faster than wildfire. Matthew Pierce and Penelope Dawson were courting. By the time Penelope returned to the boarding house, all three of her fellow residents were waiting to hear every detail. Is it true? Lucy demanded. Did he really kiss you right there on Main Street? He did, Penelope confirmed, unable to keep the smile off her face. How romantic. Sarah sighed. I knew this would happen. I called it on Thanksgiving. Mrs. Foster appeared in the doorway of the parlor, looking pleased. I am happy for you, dear. Matthew is a good man, and you two are well suited. But you will conduct this courtship properly, with appropriate chaperones and decorum. Of course, Mrs. Foster, Penelope agreed, though privately she thought that horse had already left the barn, given that she had kissed Matthew in front of half the town. The next few months passed in a blur of happiness. Matthew courted Penelope with old-fashioned determination. He took her to church socials and town dances, always with a proper chaperone. He brought her wildflowers that he picked on his land. He taught her to ride a horse, laughing when she shrieked the first time the gentle mare broke into a trot. She made him a new shirt for Christmas, and the look of wonder on his face when he opened the carefully wrapped package made her eyes sting with tears. They talked about everything. Their childhoods, their hopes, their fears. Matthew told her about the loneliness of his first years in Colorado, the bone-deep exhaustion of building his ranch alone. Penelope shared memories of her parents, the pain of losing them, the suffocating years with her uncle. I used to wonder if I would ever feel truly happy again, she confessed one evening in late January. They were sitting in Mrs. Foster's parlor, properly chaperoned with Lucy knitting in the corner. After my parents died, everything felt gray and hopeless. But now, with you, everything is bright again. You brought color back into my life too, Matthew said, holding her hand in both of his. I did not realize how lonely I was until I met you. By February, everyone in Greeley seemed to be waiting for Matthew to propose. The speculation became a source of amusement for Penelope, who assured her curious customers that she would let them know when something official happened. The proposal came on a cold March morning. Matthew had asked Penelope to come out to the ranch, claiming he wanted her opinion on fabric for new curtains in the cabin. Sarah accompanied her as chaperone, though she kept finding excuses to stay outside and admire the horses. The cabin does not need new curtains, Penelope said, looking around at the perfectly serviceable curtains already hanging at the windows. Matthew, what is this about? You are right, it does not need curtains, he admitted. but I wanted you to see the place again. To see if you could imagine living here." Her breath caught. "Living here?" Matthew dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the cabin. "Penelope Dawson, you are the bravest, kindest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. You took a terrible situation and turned it into triumph. You dreamed of building a life out west, and you made that dream real through sheer determination. I want to spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams and building new dreams together. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Penelope said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her soundly. Outside, they heard Sarah whoop with excitement, and they broke apart laughing. "I do not have a ring yet," Matthew admitted. "I wanted to ask you first, make sure you would say yes before I presumed." "I do not need a ring," Penelope told him. "I just need you." But he insisted on buying her a ring, a simple gold band with a small diamond that Penelope treasured more than the finest jewels. They set the wedding date for May, giving Penelope time to sew her own wedding dress and make arrangements. The next few months were a whirlwind of preparation. Penelope worked on her dress in every spare moment, creating something beautiful from yards of ivory silk. It was the finest work she had ever done, with delicate embroidery on the bodice and sleeves. She wanted to look perfect for Matthew, wanted him to see all her skill and artistry in this one garment. They also had practical matters to discuss. Penelope's business had grown significantly, and she was reluctant to give it up entirely. Matthew assured her that she could continue sewing from the ranch. "I will build you a workroom," he promised, "with good windows for light and plenty of space for your supplies. You worked too hard to build this business to abandon it now." "But ranch work takes time too," Penelope worried. "Cooking, cleaning, helping with the horses. I do not want to neglect my duties as your wife." "We will figure it out together," Matthew said firmly. "Marriage is a partnership, Penelope. We will share the work and support each other's ambitions." The wedding took place on May 15, 1874, at Greeley's Union Church. It seemed like the entire town attended. Penelope walked down the aisle on Tom Watson's arm, since she had no family present. She wore her beautiful dress and carried wildflowers that Matthew had picked that morning. When she reached the front of the church and saw Matthew waiting for her, looking handsome in his best suit with tears shining in his eyes, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, and Penelope barely heard the rest of the ceremony over the pounding of her heart. She spoke her vows clearly and firmly, meaning every word. Matthew's voice was steady as he promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his life. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Matthew kissed her sweetly, tenderly, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. They walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife, and Penelope felt like she was floating. The town had organized a reception at the community hall. There was food and music and dancing. Penelope danced with Matthew until her feet hurt, then danced some more. She accepted congratulations from what seemed like every person in Greeley. Mrs. Foster cried happy tears. Sarah caught the bouquet and declared she would be next to Mary. Even stern Mrs. Hartford, who had traveled on the stage coach with them, had come from Denver for the wedding and pronounced it a beautiful ceremony. "Are you happy?" Matthew asked late in the evening as they stood together watching the celebration. "Happier than I knew was possible," Penelope replied honestly. "When I lost my passage money in St. Louis, I thought my life was over, but it was actually just beginning." "I was having the worst day," Matthew confessed. "I had gotten cheated on the sale of 2 horses, and I was angry and tired and questioning every choice I had made. Then I saw you at that ticket window, trying so hard to hold yourself together, and something just clicked. I knew I was supposed to help you. I did not know it would lead to this, but I am grateful it did. So am I, Penelope said, leaning into his side. So am I. They left the reception as the sun was setting, riding out to the ranch in Matthew's wagon. Penelope was nervous about the wedding night, but Matthew was patient and gentle, and what she had feared became something beautiful. They came together in love and trust, and when they finally fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, Penelope felt completely at peace. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Learning to share space with someone, to coordinate schedules and responsibilities, required patience from both of them. But they approached it the same way they approached everything else, with communication and compromise. Matthew built Penelope a workroom as promised, a bright space attached to the cabin with windows facing east to catch the morning light. She continued taking commissions from town, though at a reduced pace that allowed her to focus on ranch work as well. She learned to cook for hungry ranch hands when Matthew hired help for spring branding. She learned to tend the kitchen garden and preserve food for winter. She even learned to help with the horses, though she left the actual training to Matthew. For his part, Matthew helped with household tasks without being asked. He split the firewood and hauled the water. He did not complain when supper was late because Penelope had gotten absorbed in a complicated sewing project. He understood that her work was important to her, and he respected it. Their first winter together was hard. Snow piled higher than Penelope had ever seen, isolating them at the ranch for days at a time. They lost 2 horses to illness despite Matthew's best efforts. Money was tight, and there were nights when Penelope worried they would not make it through. But they did make it through together. When spring arrived and the snow melted and the first green shoots appeared, Penelope felt like they had passed through fire and emerged stronger. In June, Penelope missed her monthly cycle. She waited another month to be certain before telling Matthew, and when she finally shared the news, his joy was incandescent. "A baby," he breathed, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you pleased?" Penelope asked, though his expression made the answer obvious. "Pleased does not begin to cover it," Matthew replied. "Penelope, you have given me so much already. A home, a partnership, love, and now a child. I am the most fortunate man in Colorado territory." The pregnancy was relatively easy. Penelope continued her sewing work until she became too large to sit comfortably at her work table. She continued helping around the ranch, though Matthew fretted about her overdoing it. Dr. Mitchell, who served Greeley and the surrounding area, pronounced her healthy and predicted an early spring delivery. Their son was born on March 2nd, 1875, after a labor that lasted 12 hours. Matthew paced outside the cabin while Mary Watson and Mrs. Foster attended the birth, and when Mary finally emerged to tell him he had a healthy son, he burst through the door before she could finish the sentence. "Penelope," he said, dropping to his knees beside the bed where she lay exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle. "Are you all right?" "I am perfect," she assured him. "Meet your son." Matthew took the baby with trembling hands, his face full of wonder. "He is so small and perfect. Penelope, he is perfect." They named him Samuel after the rancher who had helped Matthew years ago. Little Samuel Hart Pierce was baptized in the Union Church a month later, and half of Greeley attended the celebration afterward. Being a mother was harder than Penelope had anticipated. The constant demands, the exhaustion, the worry. But it was also more rewarding than she could have imagined. Samuel's first smile, his first laugh, the way he reached for her when he was upset, all of it filled her heart to overflowing. Matthew was a devoted father. He would walk the floor with Samuel when he cried at night, giving Penelope precious hours of sleep. He made toys and carved a cradle with elaborate detail. He sang off key lullabies that made Penelope laugh, and somehow still managed to soothe their son. "You are a natural father," Penelope told him one evening, watching him play with 6-month-old Samuel on a blanket in the cabin. "I am making it up as I go," Matthew admitted, "but I love him so much it terrifies me sometimes." "I know exactly what you mean," Penelope replied. When Samuel was a year old, Penelope started taking on small sewing projects again. She set up a crib in her workroom and would sew while Samuel played nearby. It felt good to create again, to use her skills. Some women in town judged her for continuing to work, but most understood that the extra income helped the ranch, especially as Matthew expanded his operation. In 1876, Colorado was admitted as a state, and Greeley celebrated with a massive festival. Penelope and Matthew took 2-year-old Samuel to watch the parade and festivities. The town had grown even more, with new buildings going up every month. "Remember when we arrived here?" Matthew asked, watching Samuel toddle after a butterfly. "The town was barely 3 years old, and you were terrified but pretending to be brave." "I was not pretending," Penelope protested. "I was terrified and showing it quite obviously." "Maybe," he conceded, "but you did it anyway. You got off that stagecoach and built yourself a life. That is real courage." "We built a life," she corrected. "Together." In 1878, their daughter arrived, a tiny girl with Penelope's blue eyes and Matthew's dark hair. They named her Margaret Rose after Penelope's mother. Samuel, now 3, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch prospered. Matthew's horses gained a reputation for quality throughout Colorado, and he expanded to nearly 200 acres. Penelope's sewing business evolved into something more selective, taking only special commissions that challenged her skills. She made wedding dresses and christening gowns, elaborate pieces that people treasured. In 1880, a 3rd child joined the family, another son they named James. Samuel was 5, Margaret was 2, and the cabin that had seemed spacious suddenly felt cramped. Matthew spent that winter building an addition, doubling the size of their home. He added a proper dining room and 2 more bedrooms, along with a larger workroom for Penelope. "This is getting fancy," Penelope teased as she watched the construction. "When we started, you had a 1-room cabin and 3 horses." "That was before I had a wife with expensive tastes," Matthew replied, pulling her close and kissing her temple. "Expensive tastes. I am the most frugal person you know." "True," he admitted, "but our children deserve space to grow, and you deserve a proper house, not a cabin." The children grew like weeds. Samuel was quiet and thoughtful, fascinated by books and learning. He announced at age 7 that he wanted to be a teacher, which delighted Sarah, who still taught at the Greeley school. Margaret was wild and free-spirited, more interested in horses than dolls, always following her father around the ranch. James was the charmer, with an easy smile and a way of getting out of trouble with a well-timed joke. In 1885, Penelope realized she was pregnant again at age 33. This pregnancy was harder, her body tired from years of childbearing and hard work. Matthew worried constantly, hovering over her until she wanted to scream. "I am fine," she insisted. "Women have babies all the time." "Not my woman," he replied. "Not without me worrying." Their 4th child, a daughter they named Lucy after Penelope's friend from the boarding house days, arrived in March 1886. The birth was difficult, and Dr. Mitchell told them quietly afterward that Penelope should not have any more children. They accepted this news with mixed feelings. Their family felt complete with 4 children, but knowing definitively that there would be no more carried a certain melancholy. 4 children, Matthew said one evening, watching their brood around the dinner table. Samuel was 14 now, helping serve the younger ones. Margaret was 8 and already as tall as some 10-year-olds. James was 6 and chattering nonstop about a bird's nest he had found. Baby Lucy slept peacefully in Penelope's arms. "We have built quite a family." "We have," Penelope agreed. "Sometimes I think about that scared girl standing at the ticket window in St. Louis, and I can barely recognize her." "She is still in there," Matthew said. "That determination, that courage, you just have more reasons to be brave now." The years continued their steady march. Samuel graduated from the Greeley School at 16 and went on to attend college in Denver, studying to be a teacher. Margaret shocked everyone by announcing at 15 that she wanted to train horses like her father. Matthew and Penelope discussed it and decided to let her pursue her passion, unconventional as it was for a young woman. "I was unconventional too," Penelope reminded Matthew. "Traveling west alone, continuing to work after marriage. If our daughter wants to train horses, we should support her." James showed an aptitude for business, helping manage the financial side of the ranch from a young age. Lucy, the baby, was gentle and artistic, spending hours drawing and painting the Colorado landscape. In 1896, Samuel married a young woman from Denver, a fellow teacher named Elizabeth. The wedding was held at the ranch, now prosperous enough to host a large celebration. Penelope stood with Matthew, watching their son exchange vows, and felt the weight of time's passage. "Where did the years go?" she whispered to her husband. "Into this," he replied, gesturing to the gathered crowd. "Their children, their grandchildren, their friends old and new. Into a life well lived." Margaret married a neighboring rancher's son in 1898, a man who respected her skills and supported her passion for horses. They settled on a spread adjacent to Matthew and Penelope's land. James went to Denver for business school but returned to Greeley to open a mercantile, marrying a sensible woman who helped him run the shop. Lucy was the last to marry, in 1906, choosing an artist who saw the world the way she did. They moved to Colorado Springs but visited often. Matthew and Penelope found themselves alone in the big house they had built, their children grown and gone, but they were not lonely. They had each other, and decades of shared history, and the deep contentment that came from a life of purpose and love. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1904, Penelope and Matthew stood on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the mountains. They were both 52 years old now, their hair touched with gray, their hands showing the wear of decades of work. But when Matthew pulled Penelope close, the embrace felt exactly as it had on their wedding night. "You remember that day in St. Louis?" Matthew asked. "When I first saw you?" "Every detail," Penelope replied. "I remember thinking you were either the kindest man in the world or a scoundrel trying to take advantage." "And which did I turn out to be? The kindest man in the world," she said without hesitation. "You gave me everything, Matthew. A home, a family, a future I never dreamed possible. You gave me everything too," he countered. "You took a lonely man in a cabin and turned his house into a home. You gave me children and partnership and love. I think I got the better deal." "We both won," Penelope decided. "That is the truth of it. We both won." The years after 1904 were gentler. Matthew gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, turning most of the work over to Margaret and her husband. Penelope stopped taking sewing commissions, though she still made clothes for her grandchildren. They traveled some, visiting their children and exploring parts of Colorado they had never seen. In 1910, on a crisp October morning, Matthew had a heart attack while working in the barn. Margaret found him and got him to the house, and Dr. Mitchell's son, who had taken over the practice, came immediately. Matthew survived, but the doctor was grave. His heart is damaged, Dr. Mitchell told Penelope privately. He needs to rest, avoid stress and heavy work. I cannot say how much time he has, but he needs to take care. Penelope relayed this to Matthew, who looked frustrated but resigned. I am 58 years old, he said. I suppose I have pushed this body hard enough. You are going to be around for a long time yet, Penelope said firmly, even as fear clutched at her heart. We have grandchildren to spoil and gardens to tend. You are not leaving me. I have no intention of leaving you, Matthew promised. You are stuck with me. He did rest, reluctantly, spending his days in the rocking chair on the porch or puttering in Penelope's garden. She found him there one evening in spring of 1911, tending her roses with the gentle care he brought to all living things. You have done a good job with these, he commented as she joined him. They are beautiful this year. You helped, Penelope replied, settling onto the bench beside the garden. You always help. Penelope, I need to say something. Matthew set down the pruning shears and turned to face her. I need you to know that every day since I met you at that ticket window has been a gift. You have given me the best life a man could ask for. Why does this sound like goodbye? Penelope asked, fear making her voice sharp. It is not, he assured her. I am just saying what needs to be said. I love you, Penelope Pierce. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, she replied, taking his hand. And I am planning on many more years of you annoying me with your terrible singing and leaving muddy boots by the door. He laughed, that same wonderful laugh that had been warming her heart for nearly 40 years. I will do my best. True to his word, Matthew lived for another 10 years, each one precious. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1914 with all 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren in attendance. The ranch house was bursting with life and love and noise, and Penelope thought her heart might burst with joy. This, she told Matthew that night after everyone had finally gone home or to bed. This is what we built, not just the ranch or the house, but this family, this legacy. Not bad for a cowboy and a seamstress, Matthew agreed. In the spring of 1921, Matthew's heart finally gave out. He died peacefully in his sleep, Penelope beside him as she had been for 46 years of marriage. She woke that morning to find him gone, and the grief was overwhelming. But mixed with the grief was gratitude for the life they had shared, the love that had sustained them through nearly 5 decades together. The funeral was held at the Union Church, the same church where they had married. The building was packed with people whose lives Matthew had touched over the years. Penelope sat in the front pew, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and listened to the minister talk about Matthew's integrity, generosity, and devotion to family. But what Penelope remembered most was simpler than that. She remembered a young cowboy offering help to a desperate woman in St. Louis. She remembered his patient courtship and his gentle kiss in the snow. She remembered his steady presence through childbirth and hardship and triumph. She remembered 46 years of waking up beside him, of building a life together one day at a time. After the funeral, Samuel pulled his mother aside. "Are you going to be all right, Mother?" "Eventually," Penelope replied honestly. "Right now it hurts terribly, but I will be all right." "Your father gave me so much, Samuel. He gave me a chance when I had nothing, and from that chance grew everything I hold dear. You children, this life, all of it traces back to that moment when a kind cowboy offered to help a stranger. I paid him back for that ticket, but he gave me so much more than passage west. He gave me a lifetime of love." Penelope lived for another 15 years after Matthew's death, remaining on the ranch that they had built together. Her children wanted her to move to town, to live somewhere easier, but she refused. The ranch was her home, filled with memories of Matthew and their life together. She spent her final years surrounded by family, watching her grandchildren grow and her great-grandchildren arrive. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the Wild West days when Greeley was new and anything seemed possible. She taught her granddaughters to sew, passing on the skills that had given her independence all those years ago. In the summer of 1936, at the age of 84, Penelope Pierce passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the big bed she had shared with Matthew for so many years. She was buried beside him in the Greeley cemetery, under a simple stone that read, "Together in life and in death, 1852 to 1936. At her funeral, her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to remember a remarkable woman. They spoke of her strength and her kindness, her determination and her love. But perhaps Lucy, now 50 years old and a grandmother herself, said it best. "My mother always told me that life could change in a moment, that one act of kindness could alter everything. She lived that truth. A cowboy paid her passage west, and she paid him back with a lifetime of love. From that one moment of generosity grew this entire family, this legacy. We are all here because my father chose to help a stranger, and my mother chose to believe in the possibility of new beginnings. That is what I want us all to remember. Not just their love for each other, but their belief in taking chances, in helping others, in building something meaningful from nothing. That is the real inheritance they left us." The ranch continued to thrive under Margaret's stewardship and then her children's. The big house that Matthew had built remained in the family for generations. And in Greeley, now a thriving city barely recognizable from the small settlement of 1873, the story of Matthew and Penelope Pierce became a kind of legend. The cowboy who paid a woman's passage west, and the seamstress who built a life from nothing and paid him back with a lifetime of love. It was a story about kindness and courage, about taking chances on strangers and on dreams. Most of all, it was a story about love, the kind of love that transcends time and builds legacies that last long after the lovers themselves are gone.